No matter where you're from, your country has problems. It's easy to dump on the United States with the stains of slavery, indigenous genocide, and civil rights violations throughout its history. But is all that unique to the USA? Freedom of the press is a right free peoples of the world can't do without. The press keeps the government in check, informs the people, gets to the bottom of corruption, and holds leaders accountable. It's the hard work of journalists across the world that have brought us groundbreaking stories like these.
That vaccinated people do not carry the virus, don't get sick.
This looks like your classic disinformation campaign.
Russians offered help, the campaign accepted help. The Russians gave help, and the president made full use of that help.
You talk about cancel culture, who to shame. Ivermectin, a dewormer, really?
They are shaming themselves.
This was a much, much more complicated story, and it appears at least that this young man was trying to do the right thing.
How can you doubt that? How do you not believe that?
What you're seeing behind me is one of multiple locations that have been burning in Kenosha, Wisconsin.
Twitter users were comparing the ABC video to YouTube video from a Kentucky gun range.
I think most people think of rape as being sexy.
At the dessert course, he gets 2 scoops of vanilla ice cream with his chocolate cream pie, instead of the single scoop for everyone else.
A fistfight is in progress in downtown Springfield. Early reports indicate, and these are very preliminary, that one of the fighters is a giant lizard.
Every year, NGO Reporters Without Borders releases their World Press Freedom Index. Countries like Norway, Denmark, Sweden, and Finland consistently rank at the top of the list. But what about the bottom? I bet a few mainstay Earth villains come to mind, like China, Russia, and North Korea. And you're not wrong. They are all consistently at the bottom of the rankings, but not the very bottom. In fact, the most frequently lowest ranked country in terms of press freedom on the planet, number 180 out of 180, is Eritrea.
Yeah.
How does this tiny East African nation consistently beat out major corrupt oligarchies and massive totalitarian control states to be the most domineering and oppressive country when it comes to the press? It's a complex answer, with some parts stemming from its decades-long fight for independence, to its paranoid and corrupt president, to the way the country operates as a military stratocracy today. All of these factors and more stifle any non-state-approved journalistic or creative endeavor, censoring anything that the government doesn't like, no matter how minute.
You're charging too high prices for sweaters, glasses. You right to jail.
To learn more about Eritrea's harsh treatment of journalists, we must first learn about Eritrea itself. So let's get right to it. Today, we'll explore why Eritrea has problems with the press. Right here. This guy. Wars and stuff, you know.
Stop wasting my time.
The boundaries of modern-day Eritrea were settled during the Scramble for Africa, the 19th century mass conquest and colonization of the continent by 7 European powers: Belgium, France, Germany, Great Britain, Italy, Portugal, and Spain. After an Italian shipping company acquired some coastal Eritrean land in a purchase from a ruling chief in 1870, Italy took advantage of a power vacuum in the region after the death of an Ethiopian emperor and founded the colony of Italian Eritrea in 1890. Travelers would find that much of Eritrea contains Italian architecture, design, and artistic influence. The British kicked the Italians out of Eritrea during World War II, and in the ensuing chaos that was reconstructing most of the planet post-1945, Ethiopia annexed Eritrea in the 1950s.
I've got news for you. You're mine now. You belong to me.
Suffice to say, many native Eritreans did not take kindly to their country being colonized for 60 years, only to have it annexed by their neighbor immediately after. This sparked a civil war that would last 30 years. Enter Isaias Afwerki, a bright, young, highly educated Eritrean national. He wanted to see a free Eritrea in his lifetime. And in the mid-1960s, he joined the Eritrean Liberation Front, a group of rebels engaging in guerrilla warfare against Ethiopian forces in the occupied Eritrean lands. To his dismay, the group was disorganized and unwelcoming, especially to Christian freedom fighters. He defected in the 1970s and formed a splinter group, the Eritrean People's Liberation Front.
Or the Mongooses. That's a cool team name, the Fighting Mongooses.
Utilizing Eritrean nationalist pride, he was able to bring in more and more resistance factions under the EPLF's wing, and continued to consolidate power throughout the 1980s, making a name for himself as a great military and political leader. He and his forces retook the Eritrean capital Asmara in 1991, and declared de facto independence from Ethiopia shortly thereafter. Eritrea received de jure independence from the UN in 1993. Shortly thereafter, the EPLF rebranded into the gentler-sounding People's Front for Democracy and Justice, and the National Assembly elected Isaias president, the new free Eritrea's very first. I'd love to say this is where the story ends, with a happy ending, but then you wouldn't be watching this video, would you?
Hang on, this is gonna be bad.
In 1997, 4 years into Isaias' term, the Transitional Constitutional Commission of Eritrea drafted and submitted a new constitution, which was eventually ratified by the National Assembly. In it were many progressive ideas and freedoms you'd see in the most liberal nations on the planet: separation of powers, democratic elections of leaders, due process, and human rights guarantees, including, you guessed it, freedom of the press. So what happened to this constitution? Absolutely nothing. Isaias continues to ignore it to this very day. Nothing gets the mind off a good old power grab like an all-out war though, eh? 1998 saw the eruption of the Eritrean-Ethiopian War, started when Eritrean troops invaded Ethiopia-occupied Badme, which Eritrea felt was rightfully their territory. 2 years and hundreds of thousands of lives later, and the independent Eritrea-Ethiopia Boundary Commission ended up agreeing with Eritrea and ceded the land to them. It was this war and other early 2000s world events that would give Isaias an even stronger grip on Eritrea and bring about a permanent end to the independent free press in his country. It's 2001. Isaias has been in power for 8 years. In that time, he's held 0 elections, ignored the legitimately ratified constitution, started a border war that many suspect contained horrific war crimes, and shows no signs he plans to step down anytime soon. He has no love lost for the press either. In fact, in 1996, he passed a law stating that any journalist or media who wanted to work in Eritrea would have to get a license, conveniently from his government. Guess how you'd have to portray his government in your stories if you wanted one. If you didn't play nice, Isaias' government would threaten you with conscription, which could be indefinite. As the year rolls on, Isaias announces, once again, that he is delaying elections. For many, this is the last straw. The G15, a collection of 15 ministers of his own party, including his vice president, write an open letter in May of that year, urging Isaias to step down and hold open elections, while calling his actions in office illegal and unconstitutional. Isaias does not take this well.
Now you've done it. Now you've fudged the bucket and told me too many words to know.
Isaias has all of the G15 arrested and thrown in prison. He arrests prominent opposition leaders as well. Elections are now postponed indefinitely, not just for the short term. And yes, all independent media is subsequently banned. State media is now the only approved media in Eritrea. Journalists are rounded up and imprisoned. Of the 14 in prison as of the publication of this video in 2024, it's suspected some have been there since the original purge in 2001. Of course, Isaias, the clever guy that he is, did not say that he was shutting down independent media because he just felt like it. His argument was that of national security, and that they had broken media laws. You know, that one from '96 that said you had to basically do whatever the government wanted to get a pass? That crazy, stupid law? Yeah. His last part of Order 66 was to require that all media be submitted to the government for approval before it is printed or aired. By the way, you know the date when Isaias shut down the press? September 18th, 2001. Some say he did it because the world was so hyper-focused on another major shocking event, so he thought that he could more easily get away with it. That's right. You know the major world event I'm talking about. For 12 years, all the best prizes on McDonald's Monopoly weren't won legitimately. The whole thing was rigged, and everyone in the world was a buzz. I have been legally advised to mention that Isaias might have been using the 9/11 terror attacks as cover. Eritrea had always been something of a military state leading up to 2001, but now it was 1984 meets the dictator meets Family Feud. The military now controls everything: the press, the government, the courts, education, even art and literature. Write a short story or poem they don't like, you could be tossed in prison.
Like to eat my ham. It makes me feel like schmam. Have you seen the movie Kazam?
Right to jail.
Sadly, the press remains squashed under Isaias' thumb today, and it looks like it will stay that way even as he approaches 80, as elections are but a fever dream. In fact, in 2010, when asked when elections would be held, he replied, "Let's wait 3 or 4 decades."
So you're telling me there's a chance?
Many of the imprisoned press are never even charged with a crime. They lack access to their families and lawyers, who likely don't know which prison they're in. Petitions to free them are routinely ignored, whether from the UN or NGOs, and Isaias won't let any of them into the country anyway. One such prisoner of conscience, thought to be incarcerated since 2001, is Swedish-Eritrean dual-citizen journalist David Isaak. David sought asylum in Sweden in 1987, but returned to Eritrea in 1993 when it gained independence. He worked at an independent newspaper called Decimated that rightly reported on the ongoing clashes in 2001 between the G15 and the Isaias regime. He was arrested on September 23rd, and except for 2 days to see a doctor in 2005, has never set foot outside of prison since. In a 2009 interview with a Swedish TV station, Isaias said he will never free David, and he will never see a trial, claiming he knows how to handle his kind. Think about this. Eritrean male life expectancy is 66 years, and David has been in prison being tortured, starved, and beaten for 23 years as of this video. That's 35% of what could be his entire life. The press that aren't imprisoned have no choice but to work for the state-controlled media. This includes 4 newspapers, 1 TV station, and 2 radio stations. Isaias is supposedly so paranoid about what information gets out to the public that he circulates as little as possible, even among the people in his own government. Whatever does get out is heavily edited or censored.
A president has been overthrown and
replaced by the benevolent General Krull.
Foreign journalists, if they even get in, are closely monitored, as are those they interview. Access to information, either via people or the internet, is heavily restricted or outright denied. In fact, in order to visit internet cafes, you must turn over your ID card, and every site you visit is monitored by the government. The one glimmer of hope is that the public doesn't believe what the state-run media tells them, so they ignore it. Few Eritreans watch EriTV, the state television station, because they know it's all propaganda. Instead, most citizens have a satellite dish and watch out-of-country news networks like the BBC, though the government is careful to censor any Eritrean stories. Exiled Eritrean journalists are doing their part to try to bring real news to their fellow countrymen back home. In 2009, Eritrean activists and Reporters Without Borders launched Radio Arena, a radio station accessible via internet and satellite and broadcast into Eritrea, despite the government's frequent attempts to jam it. In 2013, the underground newspaper Echoes of Forto launched in Asmara, written by a mixture of journalists inside and outside the country to call out the government. But unfortunately, besides a reprinting in 2014, I couldn't find any evidence that they are still around. As more Eritrean journalists flee the country, there's hope that through continued grassroots efforts, more will learn of the oppressive regime, and independent journalism will one day return to the country. With massive world threats like Iran, North Korea, Russia, and China dicking around on the world stage daily, it boggles my mind that Eritrea continues to be the worst country in terms of press freedom. Why? Why does a tiny African nation with no real strategic military value, economic resources, or standing on the world stage suppress journalists so mightily for so many years? What is Isaias Afwerki's problem?
He wants to be president.
One potential reason Isaias does what he does is he has to. He's been in power since 1993. Since then, he's initiated wars, crackdowns on the citizenry, and illegal imprisonments, and has been accused of wartime atrocities, supposed bribery schemes, and the torture of innocent prisoners. The list goes on. If he allows a free press, all they're going to report on are the horrible things he's done. He can't afford a free press because they'd expose what a corrupt, violent leader he is. Maybe if he had allowed the Constitution to go forth in '97 and held free elections, he could have gotten away with some of the stuff from the '90s. But we're way past the point of no return in 2024. Another potential reason he acts like this is simply that he can. He's gotten away with it at every stage of his rule. Why stop now? Hell, the largest US military base in Africa is literally right next door in Djibouti. Not once have they done anything to him. Their main goals are counterterrorism and intel in Yemen and Somalia. So the USA doesn't care. The UN? All they do is send strongly worded letters about David Isaac every couple of years. They've still never set foot in the country with troops or aid. That just leaves his own people, who in 30 years have rebelled exactly once. In 2013, in what would be known as the Fordo Incident, 100 soldiers broke into the HQ of Eritrea and forced the station director to read a statement live on air, demanding the release of all political prisoners and prisoners of conscience, and the immediate implementation of the 1997 Constitution. 2 sentences into the document, the feed cut out. But the next morning at 10 a.m., Eritrea went live again, and the people of Eritrea finally got to know the truth. There was a big snowstorm in Paris. The lack of a free press provides Isaias with an ill-informed citizenry. But what about the internet? Hard to control every single aspect of the internet, right? True, except 1% of the Eritrean population has access to it. And remember, the ones that do have to turn over their ID to get said access. With no access to legitimate media sources, an oppressive military regime taking over every aspect of the citizenry's lives, and the threat of indefinite conscription looming over every potential action a person can take, Isaias basically has free rein to do whatever he wants. The other thing to consider is Isaias is a nationalist. He spent his entire youth gaining Eritrean independence from Ethiopia, and when he succeeded, his fellow countrymen put him in charge to lead the way forward. To him, he might be the only thing standing between an independent Eritrea and getting swallowed up by another power. Even after the war ended in 2000, relations were friendly with Ethiopia, but not great. It wasn't until a peace deal was signed in 2018 that relations truly flourished. But there are still skirmishes in the Tigray region even today. Maybe Isaias, with all he's seen in his life, simply thinks, I'm the only thing holding everything together. I'm the last man between Eritrea existing and not. Well, congratulations, Isaias Afwerki. Because of you, Eritrea is free, and Eritreans are not. It's very easy in our hyperpolarized world to mock the media. There are times when the bias of some in the media shines so brightly you'd think you might go blind. They have slants, they get things wrong, sometimes on purpose, they omit key facts, they have agendas, they inject opinion as truth, they deceptively cut clips to frame the way something happened from the view they want, and so on. And then we, as free people, get to call them out on it. That is the value of being free people with a free press. Whether we like it or not, having a free press means that some media is going to report things in ways we don't like. The left is going to mock Fox, and the right is going to bemoan MSNBC. But that's a good thing. The bad thing is the day we don't have a Fox or MSNBC to mock at all. Independent journalism is the lifeblood of the media world. It keeps in check not just our governments, corporations, and public figures, but our large media outlets as well. If the free world does what Eritrea did to the independent press, then expect the rest of our freedoms to crumble away soon after. Thanks for watching, and please like and subscribe to learn why your country has problems.